For now, let's go on to our conversation of the day, where we are asking you, our viewers, how can public institutions be improved in order to ensure good service delivery, in order to ensure good human rights? And in this regard, we're going to bring in our guests of the day. It's a few of them. We have the Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng. She's the president of SALGA. A very good day, and thank you so much for joining us. We also have Trevor Fowler, who's a former city manager at the city of Joburg, but we're talking to him as the chairperson of an independent committee of inquiry into Gauteng municipalities and a report they released during the week. Neil Cole is the executive director of the Collaborative Africa Budget Reform, and he joins us regarding a conversation that took place on Friday with regards to servant leadership, commemorating the life of Daniel Plakis. And Mielani Oleni is a development finance executive at Ndiso Consulting. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. But first, let me start with you, Councillor Nkadimeng. I know we're talking about Human Rights Day, but I think it's quite timely that we're talking about this, because in terms of your personal family experience, we've been talking 4 years about the disappearance in 1983 of your sister Nokuthula Simelane and the challenges that your family encountered in terms of uncovering the truth. I know I'm digressing, but just tell us how this relates to Human Rights Day that we're celebrating and marking today.
Thank you very much, Desiree, and good morning to our viewers. I think this really is important. And there wouldn't have been a freedom fighter who was prepared to lay his or her life if it was not for the betterment of the people. So it relates very clearly to what Nokuthula died for, that the life of an African child must be better. So you interpret that by a government offering services that makes your granny's life better, that makes your aunt's life better, receiving water, electricity from a local government context, for example, but able to receive a social grant from a social development perspective, better education for a child, local economic development for an aspirant young person. I think that's what they fought for. And I would like to remember her spirit and many of those who perished on this day by ensuring that we play our little part wherever we are to ensure that our people become better.
Trevor Fowler, the conversation around service delivery is it's tied to human rights. And you delivered a report during the week with the MEC for Kokta in Gauteng, report of the Independent Committee on Inquiry, marking 20 years of democratic local government in Gauteng. Why was this report commissioned to begin with?
Well, the main reason for the commissioning of the report by MEC Maila was really about, one, why there was slow progress in municipalities delivering services. The second area was really to look at the service delivery protests and why they were taking place, and then looking at maladministration into the municipalities and ensuring that there is service delivery, also looking at sound financial governance, etc. So those things we definitely looked at, as well as service delivery. And we found that in certain areas that services were not being delivered effectively. And despite the fact that in Gauteng, in comparison to the rest of the country, there are more skills available, and yet the level of service delivery has not necessarily matched the availability of skills. Now, that doesn't mean that skills are easily available. It just means that Gauteng is in a better position than others. But there are also difficulties here as well.
One can argue that One can argue that those are not necessarily new findings, but we'll continue to have the conversation. Nilko, let's bring you into the conversation now. You took part on Friday in a conversation on the launch of a book by Daniel Plakis, the late Daniel Plakis, who is a known servant leader. And you're having this conversation about how to improve servant leadership in the country. But your specific area deals with collaborative budget reform. Just how can budgets be improved to make sure that human rights are being observed? Of course, weaving into your answer the conversation about the work of Daniel Plakis.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And I mean, the way that it weaves in, so let me deal with that first, is that I worked with Daniel Plakis at the National Treasury in the early part of 2000s. I was in the budget office and Daniel was in the public finance division, where he was responsible for overseeing all the social sector departments. If one thinks about the budget, I always take the view that the budget is a government's most important policy statement, in that what is financed by the budget is what is going to get done, right? So the funding that is going to be allocated for the building of new roads, any expansion of a social security grant, funds for learning materials for no-fee schools, all of that has to be within the budget. But the budget and the way that it is formulated is not a end in itself. There's the execution of the budget. And I think that is where I then, make the link to the importance of this book that was launched, Making Institutions Work in South Africa. The importance is how strong are the different institutions within society, both public institutions and institutions that we find within the marketplace, in order for that budget to be executed. Because it is once that budget gets executed that we start to realize the delivery of what you would consider to be the delivery of human rights, right? And whether that is in education, in healthcare, and also within social protection.
All right, and at this point, we're going to bring in from the IEC side, as we speak about preparation for local government elections, Mr. Masigo Shiburi, the Chief Electoral Officer at the IEC. Mr. Shiburi, thank you so much for making the time today. How are you interacting with municipalities and helping them not only to prepare for elections, but also to ensure that the human rights aspect of service delivery are met by these entities?
The Electoral Commission, as part of the Chapter 9 institution in the constitutional scheme, exists to give effect to the constitutional promise, especially the political rights in Section 19 for persons. Section 19 entitles every citizen free and fair elections. It also promises to adult citizens the right to vote in free and fair election and to stand for election and to hold office if so elected. So we see our role as a contribution as part of one of the state entities in the procedural aspects of democracy. In other words, how you translate votes cast for a political party into representation into the spheres of legislatures. Secondarily, we are responsible also for interacting with communities to ensure that people can cast their vote on an informed basis and they understand that symbolism of making an X on the mark, that it must stand for something, it must mean something. So we are responsible for the procedural aspect of democracy. After the election, we hand over elected representatives, and those constituted municipal councils then begin the difficult work of delivering the substantive elements of democracy, i.e. services, roads, clinics, and those type of things that people need in order to impact their lives.
Of course, Mr. Shiburi, we're getting ahead of ourselves here talking about the local government elections. You still have by-elections coming up. How has the era of COVID-19 affected the work of voting in South Africa?
Indeed, like any other sphere of life, COVID has had an impact on the work that we do. But we however understand that we must, even in the context of COVID, make sure that the voices of people are heard in the decision-making chambers of municipal councils. So we continue to deliver by-elections, but do so in a manner that also safeguards the public health of citizens, that we do not, by-elections do not turn out to be the platform for spreading the spread of disease. I'm happy to report that we've had occasion to test public safety measures in two big by-elections that we held in November last year as well as in December. We think that those measures held up very well, and they present us an opportunity to begin to plan for the LGE 2021 in the context of by-elections. To get back to your point, indeed, we have two by-elections that we have scheduled. The first is on the 21st of April, and there we have 15 wards, which implicate 14 municipalities in 7 provinces. Last week, Friday, the various MECs proclaimed the date for those by-elections, so those by-elections will go ahead. The next one is on the 19th of May. Primarily, the vacancies there relate to all those by-elections that had been postponed by the Electoral Court because the COVID-19 regulations did not permit for political activity. And in that context, the Commission had arrived to a conclusion that it cannot guarantee that the outcomes of those by-elections would be free and fair in the context of those regulations that restricted free political activity and restricted free movement. With the country going back to alert level 1, we are now in a position to clear those by-elections. So on the 19th, we'll have by-elections in 26 municipalities, affecting 40 wards, and those will be contested in 6 provinces. We will have a period of voter registration on the 10th and the 11th of April to ensure that persons who've just moved into those municipalities can check their details and register as voters for that 19th of May by-election.
Mr. Fowler, let's take you back to that report you released during the week. South Africans being really jaded at the moment with regards to service delivery, but you're looking at sound financial governance and viability, also looking at good governance. But some of your conclusions being that the municipal managers and senior staff work in terrain that in certain cases was extremely difficult, where there were instances of anonymous threats to their lives. Is this a conversation related to corruption in municipalities?
Yes, it is. But allow me just for a moment to also acknowledge Daniel Plakis. I'm a member of the Fiscal and Finance Commission, and he was the chairperson. And I knew him quite well. He was really somebody dedicated to building institutions in South Africa. So I'd like to say that because we lost him at a time when it was, we really needed leadership. We lost a good leader. But let me come back then to the municipality. In the case, and I'll give you a specific example, in the case of Lesedi municipality, there was a situation where the municipal manager was being asked to do something, which she refused to do because it was not within the legal framework. And the municipal, she had then difficulty with the council. And subsequently, she was removed as municipal manager. We did not have an opportunity really to go into all of the detail. However, we mention in the report that this question of councils wanting municipalities to do things that are illegal, it really does not bode well for municipalities. So, for instance, in the case of municipalities in Gauteng, there are several which passed unfunded budgets, meaning that their expenditure was greater than the money they were actually going to receive. which first of all is illegal. But to have the entire council pass an unfunded budget means that either the councillors did not understand their role, they did not understand the municipalities' role in terms of ensuring that they do not expend money beyond the revenue, which is actually a criminal offense. And so it's a lack of leadership that exists. So those would be some of the key issues. I could go on, but I'd allow some of my other colleagues to speak as well.
Councillor Nkadimeng, you took part in the launch of the report. Of course, it's a provincial report, but SALGA services the entire nation. What conversations is SALGA having in relation to delivery of human rights? And in terms of SALGA, this case will be service delivery.
Well, thank you, Desiree. I think we have actually moved beyond the level of conversation, but to a level of implementation of what has been found, for example, by the committee as chaired by Trevor Fowler, but also because, as you correctly say, these issues have been discovered quite a bit earlier to resemble what Gauteng has also discovered. For example, we are making a point about Lesedi, a municipal manager, for example, who was forced to do something. We've been able to put national framework, which is already at a discussion level for implementation with regard to consequence framework, which talks both to officials and councillors, because we can't keep on repeating one and the same thing and hope that the situation corrects itself. But secondly, this indicates also a level of political instability, which most of our councils are seized with countrywide. We have also tabulated a discussion document which has passed through National Assembly in terms of what are officials allowed to do in a political environment and what are they not allowed to do. And thirdly, we have come out to political parties. You have heard Trevor speaking about possibly councillors do not have an understanding when they pass an unfunded budget. We have moved further than that towards an implementation level to say we are requesting political parties to be able to feed the country and the nation with people who have got better political and leadership skills. But we don't leave it there. We take it further. All councillors are trained by SALGA, and we ensure that we do that. For example, MPEC oversight, all of them have been trained. But we also have echoed it to our portfolio committee that we do not think that the level of understanding from our councillors on what oversight is all about is also found to be wanting. So we need one proper deployment from a political party, preparedness to learn and develop a skill, hard work to be able to implement what needs to be implemented, set it correctly, but consequences where deliberately rules and legislations are not followed. So on those 4 key areas, we have moved, but we also need to deal with the issue that Trevor mentioned, the assumption that particularly in small and rural areas, municipalities are able to attract the skills that are necessary. In metros, it is relatively easier. Urban cities, it is relatively easier, but in the deep rural areas, you don't get a chartered accountant who's prepared to go to Mkanduli municipality and reside there and work in a municipality local. So we're working and grappling with those issues, but all of them are outside now at discussion level, but rather at the implementation level.
Also joined in this conversation by Mielani Oleni. He's a development finance executive at Ndiso Consulting. A very good morning to you, Mielani. Just in terms of the research you've done, we are looking ahead to local government elections, but also looking at how to improve the space to ensure it delivers on the human rights of South Africans. What are your thoughts on this conversation?
Well, I think at this stage, the report as has been discussed as well as been crafted, describe the problems as they are. And these are problems that we have known, but it is welcome that Gauteng has taken the steps forward to outline what the issues are from a Gauteng point of view. So Some of the things that we reflect on are things that we've also reflected on as DSO Consulting Group, because if you look at the institutional capability issues, and in fact, if we just take away the issue of capability on its own, the Australian Public Service has described it as leadership, strategy, and service delivery. So those are the three key things that we can also take a leaf out of this report, which confirms that the issues really of capability are really, really serious, and they need to be addressed as urgently as possible. But municipalities as well, being a quasi-state as well as a private sector side of things, where there are trading services on the one side and the service delivery imperatives, municipalities find themselves in a state of flux where they are not able to at least focus on the matters that are able to generate revenue, because revenue from this point of view is the one that is able to oil the machinery of municipalities, given that from an equitable share point of view, they only receive between 8 and 9%. So municipalities in this case also have to take it upon themselves. And perhaps if you look at how municipalities are running, they are supposed to be a fully encompassed entity, which has all the functions such as revenue collection, the service delivery aspects, and all of those other things, so that if you look at provincial as well as national government, they have different focus and a mandate. So municipalities from a capability point of view needs a greater focus on those aspects that will allow them to have excellent leadership, which is going to be visionary, yet practical, but make sure that there is a key strategy that drives the development of municipalities, as well as making sure that the issues of service delivery are accounted for and are taken very, very seriously. But the other aspect around sound financial management, municipalities are not just about sound financial management, but they are revenue generating entities, which is an aspect which must be taken very differently from the fact that there's the management aspects and then there's the compliance aspect, but they need to be enterprising from that point of view.
Neil, we talk about what government can do to make institutions work, but what can the general public do in terms of activism and being involved in the work of their local government?
Thank you, and I think it's really an excellent question, because when we think about what makes institutions work, we think about, and the point's been made about the leadership, the capability of senior management, the type of capabilities that are required by an institution to make it work. And we seldom get to talk about the accountability and the oversight, right? Things get done, things improve when there is a strong accountability framework in place, which essentially means that somebody is held accountable for their performance, and where things go wrong, that the person is held accountable for any malfeasance that has taken place. And especially at a local government level, the participation of the public in exercising their agency is very important, because it is the public at a local government level that will know that the refuse has not been removed, or that the response time to an electrical fault has not been satisfactory, or that bylaws are being violated, and the municipality is not regulating that or enforcing on the application of bylaws. I think at an organizational level, at local authority, the role of ratepayers and residents associations are important of civic organizations, so that agency of the public can be organized around these civics or around residents and ratepayers associations, so that voice becomes a stronger voice in holding a municipality accountable. And that is done either directly through the systems that the municipality has set up, or it is done through a councillor that represents a certain ward within a municipality. But it is the coalface, right, of service delivery, and at the coalface, the recipient of the service in an organized way has to be central to participating in that accountability framework.
All right, you know how they say time goes fast when you're having fun. We only have 7 minutes, so I'm going to ask each and every one of you one question, but just a quick one, thoughts from our viewers as we have this conversation. Vincent Davin says the very same government institutions like the SA Police Service are violating human rights. We're on our own. Bhuvesh says use legal route to charge those corrupt officials and set an example. Umzuvugile Ndobe says we must stop tolerating mediocrity performance from public officials. Disciplinary action must be taken against any public officials who is failing to do their job. Ms. Nkadimeng, is there enough consequence in terms of corrupt officials?
Yes, there is. Maybe enough is not the word which you could use to measure bar, because for as long as you still have one outstanding case, it means we are not sufficient enough. Hence, we need to be accountable even to the last cent. But there are measures which I've articulated which ensures that we need to up the bar. Hence, for example, training of councillors to ensure to be able to deal with oversight, but also a consequence management framework which is linked to our performance management system on how council needs to be run. That is not sufficient. But currently, COCTA, for example, has over 1,880 cases of officials who have been taken through disciplinary cases and sent home. They've got over 200 names of people who are now barred, who can no longer be officials because they've found to have acted in the wrong in the municipalities across the country. So there is movement. I mean, we're already moving at around close to 2,000 people who have been found not to be acting or who are acting in contradiction of the law, in contravention rather of the law. So there is action, but I need to be able to say to you, me and you can only celebrate when there is nothing that is on the table, which talks about maladministration and lack of oversight and accountability.
Mr. Fowler, what do you say to a viewer who says the things that have been highlighted in the report, we've spoken about them over the years, and there is no consequence for those who commit corruption?
Well, I'd agree to a certain extent that there is that the consequences are not adequate, because it is clearly one of the things that we've asked COCTA to do is to look at two cases where municipalities have outsourced revenue collection, not the arrears collection, but the day-to-day collection, and their finances are actually less. They receive less revenue than they were receiving before they hired its companies. That they must take steps against this company to end the contract and take criminal action against it. And thankfully, COCTA is looking at these recommendations and ensuring that these happen. And I could also attest to the fact that SALGA, that Councillor Nkadimeng is talking about, has undertaken training, because I'm at the Wits School of Governance, young professor there, and we do some of that training. But more of that needs to be done. But I think the key question that you raised earlier about concern from the public and putting pressure from the public on municipalities by participating in the process will start to make those changes, ensuring that they attend the committee meetings, which are public, and getting their voice heard is an important thing. Because it's not just about when you have IDP sessions, it's got to be something that happens regularly. So going beyond just protesting, but also organizing in a way where they can participate and put pressure on the council to make things happen. Because public participation is a constitutional requirement, and it's something that would bring about change if adequately exercised.
Let's bring in let's bring in Mr. Shiburi quickly, just in terms of the IEC and the local governments, the upcoming local government elections. What can South Africans look forward to in terms of your preparations?
We have commenced preparations for local government elections that must be held between the 4th of August and no later than the 1st of November 2021. We've taken measures to safeguard the public health of South Africans so that when they come to vote, they will not expose themselves to attracting the COVID-19 virus. We have tested those measures in a number of by-elections. We'll continue to do so again on the by-elections of the 21st and on the 19th. Lastly, as we commemorate Human Rights Day today, I'm happy to announce that on Friday, National Assembly adopted the amendments to the Scheme of Electoral Act. Particularly, there's one clause that is important there in the Municipal Electoral Act. That clause ensures the continued franchise rights of South African citizens who are registered as voters, but for whom we do not have an address on the voters' roll. We're making it clear that those citizens do not lose their voting rights because they do not have an address on the voters' roll, but there will be a different voting method for them, but their right to participate is safeguarded. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much to Mr. Trevor Fowler, and thank you there to Neil Cole, the Executive Director for Collaborative Africa Budget Reform Initiative, and Mr. Shifuri. Mielani, let's continue to speak with you just about the reports we're getting, the report during the week about the level of corruption and incompetency and incapability in government. What sort of advice are you giving to government in terms of their recruitment processes and how they can impact on service delivery and the work of municipalities?
So from where we are, and I think it's important that we frame this discussion of where corruption would come in or how it would come about as part of the value chain of municipalities. So one of the things I wanted to just add to the final thoughts on the last discussion to move into the next one is I think we have not spent enough time understanding the various components of how a municipal system works. If you take it from the fact that there's aspects of budgeting, there's aspects of expenditure, of supply chain, of revenue, of managing resources, and so on. Each one of those aspects form a value chain that must be understood properly. And within each one of those components are even sub-value chains that must be taken into account. So if you want to trace the fact of where the service delivery breakages would happen and where corruption could happen and how financial management could be improved, we need to look at the value chain of a municipality and understand exactly where those aspects are. Currently, we talk about the supply chain management side of things as where corruption tends to take place, but it starts elsewhere within the value chain of a municipality. And those are the things that, even in this report that we are deliberating and discussing, we need to understand those value chains and the cause and effect relationships between the various things within municipalities. Of course, corruption is a manifestation of all the other things that have not worked within the value chain. And those things are things that would then manifest in a particular way. However, the issue of good governance is one that we would want to stress and ensure that good governance is taken very, very seriously. But governance depends as well on the capability of the institution, so that that institution can be able to measure and manage and deploy and plan and organize all the resources well. So the issue that we are seeing here is that if governance is not in place and practiced properly, it can then result in processes that would result in loopholes where people can either exploit them or the external public can exploit them, such that it comes out in a way that it was not originally intended. So the advice we would give is that we need to focus on good governance. We need to understand the value chains and the sub-value chains within municipalities to an extent that we can manage the cause and effect relationship, as well as look at aspects which require compliance and those that may require condoning.
You speak about officials that might be corrupted, but the COCTA report highlights the flip side of that, which is municipal managers and senior staff who are working under serious strain in extremely difficult environments where there are instances of anonymous threats on their lives. What should be done in these instances? Trevor Fowler spoke earlier gave an example of somebody who was forced to commit illegal processes which were irregular. How should these officials be supported, both by government and the community?
I would urge that within the local government space, people obviously see opportunities within local government, but in seeing those opportunities, there's also the mind to want to exploit, as I've already said. So the transparency of a system such as supply chain management is one that must be espoused. And transparency means that from the development of a specification to the approval of a specification to the adjudication or evaluation of those tenders that are there, to the point where those tenders are now awarded to whoever the service provider is. We need to create a sense of confidence as well as transparency. And transparency means that when that process ensued, it's a public process which must never be concealed and should be opened up so that the public can also have confidence in all of those things. But the other thing is that there's reliance on procurement that comes from a municipality, where we also feel that there should be space opened up for the private sector to work jointly with municipalities such that they can further programs. In this case, the corruption may appear because municipalities are the ones paying for the services, but municipalities as well need to isolate within the various value chains aspects which must not they shouldn't be paying for, but they should rather be partnering and invite partners who can come with funding so that they can spend the funding implementing those programs on behalf of the municipalities, whether it's a public-private partnership or whatever form of a partnership that municipalities can enter into with the private sector. That can also reduce the fact that there may be activities which may be seen as being contested and where people may want to interfere and other people may want to take advantage. So there are two aspects that we need to manage. That which services that which municipalities ought to be paying for, and others that they should not be paying for, and really reduce the amount of things that go on public tenders where they are expending money, and rather invite partnerships so that partnerships can then help them to implement those programs such that they can manage quality, timelines, as well as the delivery. So those are some of the aspects which unfortunately currently the system lends itself to people being threatened because the purse of the municipality is what most people are after. But if you start diversifying the purse, it starts to change the dynamics.
At the beginning of our conversations, you highlighted an Australian example, but I want to ask you this. Just before lockdown, President Cyril Ramaphosa had started launching, in fact, he launched it in the Eastern Cape, the district development model. What are your thoughts on this model and how it can improve the efficiency of the local government delivery system as relates to South African human rights?
So I think this model attempts to change the fact that the government has always been seen as hierarchical. And hierarchical means that national is at the top, provincial is the second tier, municipalities are the bottom tier of government. But it starts to cement what the original thinking of government has always been, which is to have spheres of government. So the district development model is attempting to center the issues that have to deal with municipalities that require the national, the provincial, as well as the broader intergovernmental relations framework of working with other institutions that can help support and deliver programs and deliver services within municipalities. So in theory, we believe that it's a great model, but in practice, that is where we want to make sure that we implement it in a way that will enhance the delivery of services. To give an example, if we take a budget which has been allocated to constructing a road, if it's synchronized from a national level to the provincial level to the municipal level to build a continuous tract of road that leads to the area that was intended to have the road, it means that the synchronization. So the district development model should be about coordination, should be about synchronization, should be about sharing resources, should be about planning such that the delivery happens, and it should be about core sourcing. So the core sourcing aspect means that the government in its entirety must be able to work together to source services for that are going to adhere to value for money, but are going to be delivered. So that is the aspect of core sourcing, where provincial government must not just spend its own money to do its own work, and national does the same and local does the same, and at the end there's no coordination. So the district development model is really for us about coordinating and planning together, synchronization of activities, and pulling together resources so that those resources can be channeled towards delivering one single goal that will be done effectively and well.
Mielani, come back and talk to us as we start to have conversations about the upcoming local government elections.
Thank you very much.
Mielani Oleni is a development finance executive at Ndiso Consulting, but also thank you to Masego Shiburi, the Chief Electoral Officer for the IEC, who took part in this conversation, and Councillor Thembi Nkadimeng, and also Trevor Fowler, who was the chairperson of that report. We'll be talking some more with the MEC of Kokta about that report in a bit, but also Neil Cole, who's the executive director for Collaborative Africa Budget Reform Initiative.